No bike seems to take quite so much of a hammering as a cyclocross bike. If you race, then you'll of course be using it primarily through the winter months. And if you're really serious about racing, although you may have two cyclocross bikes, they will end up getting jet washed several times a race. And then if you don't race, well, the combination of water and grit that accumulates on your poor bike through the winter months is gonna play havoc with it. So with that in mind, we would always recommend that you do a regular cyclocross bike health check. Quick, simple, and it makes your cross bike smooth and sweet all the way through the winter. Here's how to do it. Firstly, we need to regularly check our brake pads. Now, of course, you should do this no matter what style of bike you're riding, but it's particularly important on cyclocross bikes where just one wet and gritty ride could completely take your pads apart. And the cost associated with riding a bike with no brake pads are pretty extreme. And I think it's particularly important to keep checking on disc bikes because it's very easy to simply forget about them. And then if you do wear out your disc pads completely, you have no brakes. Whereas at least with rim brakes, you could trash your rims, but you would be able to stop. Secondly, we need to regularly check our chains. Now again, this isn't something that's going to be alien to people. You need to do it on any type of bike, but with cross, chains wear out much faster, whether it's being used in muddy conditions or whether it's the lower cadences and therefore higher torque associated with the cross, your chain can wear out much faster. And of course, if your chain wears out but you continue to use it, then the chances are that you will also wear out your chain ring and your cassette as well. So make sure you check it for wear, whether that's measuring, whether that is using a chain wear checker, or indeed the old school pulling the chain away from your chain rings method. Any one of those will work. Now, chains don't necessarily need to wear out faster on cross bikes as long as you keep them really clean. And for me, the best thing that I've invested in recently is actually a chain cleaning device because that gets right in between the plates of the chain and it rinses all the grit out. So that could be something that you would definitely be worthwhile investing in as well. Number 3, cables. Now you will of course know if your cables are not quite right because your shifting won't be smooth and your braking performance could be quite frankly rubbish and you'd get no modulation. But the trick here is remembering that your cables aren't great from your ride and then actually doing something about it once you've got home and you've cleaned your bike. And although you can limp through on a bike with gritty cables through bad shifting and poor braking, to keep your bike running smoothly necessitates regular changing of cables. Now, it's not inexpensive, but I think the performance gains are certainly worth it. And there are also tricks to bear in mind that will keep a set of cables running longer, so potentially running full-length outers all the way through the frame from shifter to derailleur. And when you're installing them, making sure that you put a layer of grease on. In the short term, it will increase the friction slightly, but long term, it will keep the system sealed for much longer. Weirdly, I always find that bottom brackets wear out much faster on cross bikes. And I suppose they're subject to the same amount of grit and water as any other part, but I guess because it's such a fit and forget item, it does take me by surprise. To a certain extent, there's not much you can do other than change your bottom bracket when it wears out. But what you want to avoid is to find, come Sunday morning and you're about to leave for your race, that actually your crank's barely turned because your bottom bracket has seized in the time since you last used your bike. So, quick check before you put your bike away. Give the cranks a bit of a shake to see whether there's any play in the bottom bracket. And then the other thing is just to periodically take the cranks off and then prise the seal away and just make sure that there's not too much grit or water that's actually got into the bearings, and give it a bit of a pack out with grease and reseal it. The final regular health check that we would recommend is to remove your seat post from time to time and leave your frame upside down to allow any water that may have accumulated inside it to drain out. And the fact is, you may find that if you jet wash your bike regularly, that water does indeed get into the frame and it will sit in your bottom bracket area. And so tipping it upside down and letting it drain out is obviously a very good thing. Then as a byproduct of that, you'll also make sure that your seat post doesn't corrode into your frame. Remember, it is a risk if you're running either an aluminium frame with a carbon post or vice versa. And then when you do replace your post, make sure that you have the right product on it. So probably a fiber grip. Now, from a health check for your bike to something that will keep you healthy during the winter months, if only for motivation, and that is subscribing to GCN. It's completely free. All you got to do is click on the globe and it makes sure you're always in the right place for the latest GCN content. But if it is more content you're after right now, then how about these two, which are very relevant to your cyclocross bike? The first is how to set it up. You can get through to that one just up there. And the second one, Tom Last takes you through how to clean a muddy cyclocross bike with some fairly hard-earned secrets. That is just down there.